Hello everyone and welcome to my office in my house. This is my third attempt at making this video. My dog has interrupted me 3 times. Hopefully this time I'll be able to make it through. I do apologize. Normally you have your videos on Tuesday during the day, but it is the first week of registration, and so everybody has needed everything all at once. You might be doing that yourself, finding courses for next semester. And so as an advisor, part of my job is to make sure that I get that done. And unfortunately, I pushed this video creation off until, well, to be honest with you, it's now Wednesday. So I apologize for that, but that's the bad news. The good news is that we are on track and hopefully you're doing okay. I have not received any emails from people saying I don't understand something or having sort of those questions I talked about that I can make an extra video for and answer. That hasn't come across. Some of you have emailed about other things like access to the book or asking about clarification on an assignment and things of that nature. But I haven't really had anything else. Hopefully you all got your email back from me saying that, hopefully answering your questions. If not, by all means, let me know. If you have not gotten a response from me, literally that means I haven't gotten it. So text me or call me or send me another email and we'll get in touch. Generally, I've been able to answer people back in the same day, definitely within 24 hours. So hopefully your spring, I think holiday break is what we called it recently, and you got a little bit of time off. Most online classes don't. And so, you guys keep on keeping on. For us on our schedule, we're well on schedule. And one of the things you might have noticed is that there is your first exam and it is due on April 15th. What does that mean? What does that look like? How is that going to work? I did tell you in the introductory video that all of the exams would be online, open note, open lecture, open book, whatever have you. That is still true, obviously. You will also have a full week to take this exam. So you could take it at your convenience at any time, and you can take as long as you want. I don't know how long the average test might take, but it's not days. So I don't, know how long, but you'll have all the time you need to take it. I recommend sitting down and trying to do it all at once, but you don't have to. You can leave it and come back. Should not be a problem. You do only get one attempt at the exam, but you can take as long as you want. So no time period. All of the questions will be multiple choice or potentially some short answer. And what I mean by short answer is not short essay. I mean things like list and define the parts of an argument, things of that nature. Everything is going to come from the lecture in the book. Okay, everything. Your book is set up extremely well to tell you here's what you are supposed to learn, and then here's what you should have learned. And it gives you a glossary in the back of the chapters and discussion questions that highlight what things you are supposed to learn and focus on in your text. So hopefully all of those things will make this an incredibly successful venture for you as we head into the midpoint of the second block. I think that's all the housekeeping that we have. I will be posting your exam today, whatever. It's Wednesday, early morning, or late at night, depending on how you look at it on Tuesday. But it will be posted today, which is the 8th of April, and it will be due at 11:59 p.m. That is at night on April 15th, as the syllabus indicates. You have that full week to take it. So no problem. It'll be up tonight. Again, multiple choice, maybe a few short answer, not a whole lot. Okay. And hopefully if the Brightspace lords or leaders or whoever's in charge of Brightspace deems it so, you will be able to see your score either in full or most of it without me having to intervene and grade. So fingers crossed for that. All right, everybody, let's talk then about your reading for this week. You might have noticed in the first 2 weeks of this course, we covered 2 chapters per week, and this time we are focusing on 1 chapter. Those first 4 chapters, chapters 1 through 4, they were to set you up for understanding this chapter. What do I mean by that? Well, the general idea of what an argument is, when we use them, why we use them, what their relationship is to persuasion, how to make good arguments versus bad arguments, and how to be ethical in your argumentation. All of those things were in the first 4 chapters. Chapter 5 is where we get into the how. How do you construct an argument to be successful? And what determines the best way to formulate an argument? So let's talk about the 3 models that your book presents to you in chapter 5. Now, I might not go in the exact same order as your book, but all of the information I'm going to talk about is going to be supplemental to what's in the book and consistent with the book. So no worries there. Let's actually start with the idea of a narrative form of argument. Probably one of the most common forms of argument. Whenever someone is making an argument, we anticipate hearing something not along the lines of data claim warrant, but along the lines of a story, an example, or several examples that function as evidence of the claim that we want to make. We do this every day in our lives, right? People make arguments such as, you should really try this new dance club, or the food at this restaurant is the best food ever. Let me tell you why. Here's the experience that I had, or here's the experience that a group of us had. And so oftentimes we speak in the narrative. What does that mean, though? Well, there's 2 competing worldviews, the narrative paradigm and what we call the logical paradigm. That seems to suggest that the narrative paradigm is illogical, but that's not the case. They're both quite well-reasoned and logically sort of created and formulated. But what do we mean by that? The logical paradigm sort of works in this way that says everything is linear, that we could find cause and effect in order to draw a conclusion. And in that idea of logical paradigm, we also see things from a sort of top-down approach, more deductive than inductive. And more often than not, it's sort of, the word is going to sound bad, but dictatorial, right? There's rules to the game and a formula and an order and an organization. Narrative comes at it from a more inductive approach. It says, here are some experiences I've had in a story that I'm going to tell you in order to draw a conclusion. So let's take, for example, my idea of the best restaurant. Now, I happen to have a favorite Mexican restaurant. There is one in Springfield and there is one in Nixa. My favorite is in Nixa, and that is El Puente, which I believe translates to the bridge, if I'm not wrong. My Spanish is not great, but El Puente to me has the best Mexican food in the area. When I'm looking for really comforting Mexican food that's going to fill me up and make me feel good, that's where I want to go. If I want like a fresher Mexican, not the place to go. But there's 2 ways for me to make an argument that is persuasive either way about why El Puente is the best Mexican restaurant in the area. The first way, the logical paradigm, would suggest that I would tell you about the food itself. I might rate the food and the ingredients in the food. I might tell you what the flavors are, how they're made up, what spices or what flavors are particularly highlighted. I might talk about the service and the cleanliness of the restaurant. I'm going to rate it on a scale. I'm going to be What the term people use all the time is logical about how I present that to you. What I'm going to say is that I am going to appeal to your five senses when I explain what makes this restaurant the best restaurant, right? I am going to talk about the sight, the sounds, the smells, the taste, and the feelings that I have when I'm in the restaurant. I might tell you what their history is, what their ratings are, what, I don't know, Travel Advisor or TripAdvisor, or what Uber Eats, or what some other review, Yelp, says about the restaurant. I might collect those things for you as evidence of why this is the best restaurant. That would be sort of the logical paradigm process that I might go through. What if instead I told you about, I don't know, the last 5 times I've eaten at the restaurant, what my experiences were, how the service was when I was served by Tony versus when I was served by Rosa, right? Like, by the way, those are real people that work at the restaurant. I do actually really love that restaurant. I might tell you about the cheese sauce, the queso that they put on their burritos or not their burritos, excuse me, their enchiladas. I always say, don't give me the red sauce, the traditional red sauce, give me the cheese sauce. I will pay extra for it because it's so smooth and so creamy, and it stays smooth and creamy. It doesn't like gel up like some cheese sauces do. I don't know what they do. It's magic, right? I might talk about the way that they season the chicken, or why I always choose chicken, which is just sort of a personal preference. I might talk about their chips, the freshness. I might tell you how I love their salsa, but I can't tolerate heat anymore. So my husband always has to taste test the salsa and then tell me, yes, you can have it. No, you absolutely cannot. And maybe you might try just a little bit first and see how it is. But the flavor is always amazing. I'll tell you these stories about my experience of taking my service animal in there and how they treat him and how they treat us. And I might tell you more stories about how my son worked there for 4 years and all the information I have about the restaurant based on that. I'll tell you these stories, these narratives, to convince you that they are the best restaurant for Mexican food in the area. That is sort of the distinction between the logical paradigm and the narrative paradigm. The logical paradigm generally relies on the 5 senses, or what we call empirical data. Empirical data is literally information that is gathered through our 5 senses. Yes, we have more than 5 senses, but through those 5 senses. Narrative is, I'm going to tell you stories. I'm going to give you experiences. I'm going to describe things to you based on my experience with it, not based on data points, based on empirical data, right? There are 2 tests of a good narrative: fidelity and resonance. Your book talks about both of these. I hope I don't confuse them. Fidelity literally means that the story hangs together, that the story makes sense when you hear it, that there's a logical progression to the story, not because of logic, but because of the storytelling, right? That it makes sense in the end. The second, resonance, literally means that it rings true to you. It makes sense that that story would lead you to the conclusion that this is the best Mexican restaurant in the area. It sounds simple, but not all narratives have fidelity and not all narratives have resonance. Recently, somebody told me something. They were critiquing me, and I'm always open to critique because I make mistakes, right? But they were telling me this story that was supposed to represent my mistake. And I listened and I went, none of that makes sense. There were some significant holes in the story, right? I need you to make it make sense to me, is what I said. Because ultimately, the narrative paradigm is about sense making. If I can make this make sense to you, I am going to be more persuasive. And that's what that sort of argument formula gets you. It's a very different formula or perspective or paradigm from the logical paradigm, which is what we're going to talk about next. There are two models that your book offers you that fall under the logical paradigm. Yes, there are more out there, but your book focuses on these two, and that's great. The first one I'm going to talk about is the stock issues argument structure. What does that mean, stock issues? Well, so stock, S-T-O-C-K, meaning I don't know how to explain it, the foundation, right? The foundational sort of stock of an argument, of a position, of a claim. Those have very specific roles, right? And so your book outlines for you what those stock issues are. And yes, I am going to look at my notes because I would hate to mislead you, and my memory is not what it used to be, right? And I just realized that your book starts with the Toulmin model. Fascinating. Okay, so for some reason, my notes are hanging elsewhere. I know the Toulmin model inside and out, but the stock issues model, I sometimes forget. But I did remember the first one, so that's good. Your stock issues model includes inherency, harms, significance, solvency, and topicality. Sorry, surprised they included that one in there. But let's talk about those. So those 5 stock issues, those 5 foundational issues have to be done well, have to be explained well in order for your argument to be persuasive. What do we mean by inherency? Inherency means that there is a problem. You're establishing that there is, in fact, something that needs to be changed. So most of the time, the stock issues model is used for policy claims. We need to do something, or we need to stop doing something, right? Inherency explains what that thing is, what the situation is that we need to be considering changing. Inherency is something that either exists in the status quo or does not exist in the status quo. Now, I'm pretty sure that you all know what I mean by the status quo. The status quo is very simply what the current state of things is, right? Status quo meaning right here, right now, in this moment, what is happening, all right? And sometimes you'll hear people say things like, inherently, there is this problem. And I apologize, my book jumped a great deal, actually. And will not go back. I do apologize. Here we go. Inherency would mean like inherently, literally, in this moment, there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. There is a problem that needs to be solved, or there is a question that is being asked or presented in the status quo, and we need to argue for that to be changed. The second stock issue then is harms. What is the problem that it's causing? What damage is it doing? How big is it? What is the scope of it? What is the depth of it? What is the length of it? What could the possible descriptions be of the harms that are being caused by the current inherent problems in the status quo? Significance then follows that up. And the way they define significance is that it relates to the stock of harm, which doesn't surprise you. It's saying that the harm has to be significant. There has to be a big enough problem. So you have an inherent problem, You have a harmful problem, and how bad is that harm, right? So those are the first three parts of the stock issues. Then we jump to solvency. Solvency is literally whether or not the inherent problem can be solved, whether the harms can be diminished or completely eradicated, right? Whether or not they can be changed in one way or another. And if you don't have solvency, kind of silly to make the argument, isn't it? If you're going to identify a problem, you should probably have a way to solve it. So that's the next part of the stock issues. And then finally, last but certainly not least, is topicality. And normally the word topicality is utilized in formalized academic debate. If you were a debater in high school, you've probably heard that term. Or if you debate in college, you would have heard that term, obviously. But what does it mean to the regular folk like ourselves in this class? Topicality in the stock issues model means that the inherent problem that you are wanting to solve and think you can solve has relevancy. It's important enough and relevant to the task at hand. So while a narrative might appeal to a generalized audience, a stock issues appeal or argument will appeal to places like Congress or in the courtroom. What we are talking about right in this moment is whether or not this is relevant. All right. Does it adhere to the topic? Does it adhere to the question at hand? Does the solution solve the harm? Okay. So that's what we mean by stock issues model. Very different from the narrative model. And the stock issues model is very, very useful, again, particularly in policy. All right. Narrative argument, most of the time, is very good when you're making an argument about values, right? About the quality of something, whether it's good or bad, whether it's high or low, some quality that you're putting onto, you're making a claim about, right? Like I said, that Mexican restaurant, best Mexican restaurant in the region, right? This light is way too white. And sadly, I mean, I look pale all the time anyway, but sadly, this is the rosiest light that I have. So it's too bright. That's a quality claim that I'm making. Whereas, that we should, we should put roundabouts everywhere. Because Nixa loves putting its roundabouts everywhere. If you've been to Nixa, you know what I'm talking about, right? That we should put roundabouts in every intersection. that would be a policy, right? We should or should not do something. Whereas the third, the Tolman model. The Tolman model really is good for all three kinds of claims, right? Those three types of claims, of course, being claims of fact, claims of value, claims of policy. Now, a claim of fact, I know we like to say, this is a fact. That means it's true. But a claim of fact literally indicates that the claim can be proven true or false. Worst example ever. People back when I was in college were making the argument that the Holocaust never happened during World War II. All right? That's a claim of fact. Doesn't make it a true fact. Okay, but it is a claim of fact because it can be proven true or untrue. That's what a claim of fact is. A claim of value, literally what I just talked about. We put a quality on something. It's good or bad, or bright or dull or dark or murky. I'm trying to find opposites here. That's difficult. That it's beautiful or ugly, that it is restful or challenging, right? We put a quality on it. That's a claim of value. Finally, the claim of policy literally is we should or should not do something. Okay? we should or should not do something. It's an action. It is what Congress always does. They are always talking about whether we should or should not do something. They're generally making claims of policy on the regular. When they get onto television or their TikTok videos or something, congresspersons often say, they'll tell a story, right? They'll tell a story. They'll talk about the qualities of a policy. That's because for us as audience members, as citizens, we need to hear what their persuasive arguments are. But when they're on the floor of the Capitol, in the House or the Senate, they're making claims of policy more often than not. The Tolman model is really universal. It's good for all three types of claims. It's almost universally true that the Tolman model will always help you. Where did the Tolman model come from? Obviously, named after a guy. Toulmin, by the way, if you didn't see it in the book. Stephen Tolman died, I think, like in 2009. I was here. I was teaching here when he died. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I wanted to go see that man speak. I always planned to go to USC and watch him speak or attend a lecture, anything while he was alive. And I didn't move fast enough, which is devastating when you have like a hero, right? Stephen Tolman is one of my heroes. He was a mathematician in Germany. They rejected him because he wanted to find the mathematical equation to solve the question of how we are persuasive in moral debates, moral arguments in the public discourse. What do we mean by moral here? What we mean by moral is, how do we debate policies as good or bad? How do we debate whether we should or should not do something? How do we qualify things? How do we prove that something is true or untrue? Those are all moral questions. Not in the sense of like good person, bad person morality, not like that, but moral in the sense that they're not simply questions of action or inaction, not simply questions of policy, but questions that require debatable issues in the public sphere. That sounded nuts to apparently Europe. But the United States said, hey, we need that guy. We want that guy over here. We're going to turn him into our philosophy departments. We're going to have him teach ethics. We're going to have him teach argument. We ate it up. The idea that there could be some formula for how to present an argument to a public and do it in a persuasive way is very attractive. People wanted to know, how do I do that? And you have to admit the model is pretty much plug and play, right? He says, there are 6 parts to this model. You must fulfill these 6 parts in order to be successful. Or if you're evaluating whether or not an argument is good or not, or whether it might be successful or not, or why it's successful or not, apply these 6 parts and see how they work together. Great idea, Stephen. Awesome. Most people don't talk in those 6 parts, right? We don't generally, I was just lecturing about this yesterday in a different class. We don't generally go up to people and say, it's almost noon. Most people eat lunch around noon. My stomach is making a noise. I feel like maybe it needs something put in it. Do you want to go with me if you're also feeling like it might be time to put something in your stomach and get some lunch, right? We don't do that. We don't walk through all the premises. Instead, we say, hey, yo, G-Jet? No, want to go with me to get lunch, right? Or come sit with me if they have had lunch. We don't generally go through all of the argumentation because we don't need to. But when you're having a public discourse debate, you need to go through all of those steps. You need to be able to say, okay, I've got these data points or grounds. I've got this warrant that explains how that data or how those grounds support my claim, right? And so you've got data, warrant, claim right there. Those three are the three key or central argument parts, okay? Unfortunately, most of the time when I hear arguments in the public sphere, I hear a claim, and that's about it. Sometimes, if I'm really lucky, someone will provide some evidence, a story or an experience or a data point that they read somewhere or heard somewhere, something they experienced with their five senses empirically, some sort of data, sometimes. Getting someone to explain to you how that data supports the claim. What is the reasoning that you are using to get us from the points of data to the claim is much more difficult. We very rarely hear it. Okay. For example, I'm using current events as the example. Iran is a really bad regime. They are dangerous and they're going to hit the United States of America. So we go to war with them first, right? I understand that a ceasefire was called today. Personally, I find that to be a good thing. But the argument for why we went to war in the first place was that Iran was a threat to us, that there was some danger to us, right? And that's pretty much where it stopped. You have to dig a little bit deeper to find how we know they're a threat to us. That requires critical thinking. It requires finding information and critically thinking about that data in order to understand how it leads to the conclusion that we should go to war, right? Well, imagine trying to get that far and then saying, before you go any further, I'm going to need you to provide some backing for that warrant. So more data that backs the warrant. I'm going to need you to provide possible counter arguments, rebuttals. What are all the possible rebuttals that Iran is not a threat? I'm going to need all that. And then I'm going to need you to qualify your claim. I'm going to need you to modify it a little bit. I'm going to need you to put a qualifier on it and say that maybe we should attack Iran. Maybe we need to go to war with Iran, right? Or definitely we should go to war with Iran, depending on the backing and the evidence, the data, how that argument would work together. I don't know about you, but unless I'm digging pretty hard, I'm not going to find that argument, right? And one of the things I actually like about TikTok videos is that some of them attempt to pull apart these partial arguments or enthymemes that we get all the time. That perhaps the logic isn't there, that there is some fallacy there, that the data doesn't quite support the claim the way that we think it does. And in those videos, I find hope that people do understand how argument structure actually works. And I have seen, I have done a lot of stuff with the legal system. My father was a lawyer. And I've read a lot of briefs, and some of them barely follow the structure. If you've ever been so bored that you sat down and read congressional bills, horrifyingly scary, okay, that they do not make arguments that have all of this, right? But when we ask you to write an academic paper, we're sort of asking you to do exactly this, aren't we? You must use external sources. You must have an organized structure that is based on a thesis, a claim. You must explain how that external evidence supports your thesis, right? And then you need to tell me why that reasoning makes sense. when you draw your conclusions, and you need to make sure that you modify your argument in such a way that it takes into account all the possible other explanations. That is the argument model from Stephen Toulmin, the Toulmin model. So, those are the three main models of argument that, honestly, we engage all the time. We may just not realize it. And your book explains them very, very clearly, I feel. Hopefully, you feel the same way. So, what have you gotten out of the last 5 chapters? Well, hopefully you understand what an argument is, why we should study it, how it plays into critical thinking, but more importantly, how it plays into persuasion. Hopefully you understand the ethics and the questions that exist behind arguments, behind our evidence, behind our claims, behind our reasoning. Hopefully you understand the 3 main models of argument. That is what your exam is going to be about, is those things right there. Okay? So the book, the lectures, any notes that you've taken, you're welcome to use them. I will be posting the exam tonight. You will have it when you get this video. And you have a week to take it. Hopefully that answers everything. Hopefully I've caught up on grading. If I have not, let me rephrase. If you have not received a grade on something that was due last week, please let me know, because I did go through and grade them all. And Brightspace doesn't necessarily always get the grade up to you. So make sure you double check that. You don't have to cram for this exam. My goal with this exam is merely to know that you've been reading and comprehending the material. That's it. That you are able to find the answer. And just as a note, Googling the question will probably not get you the right answer. It may get you a correct answer, but is it the right answer in the context of the book we're reading and in the lectures that we've had? That's what you need to get to. And no, they shouldn't be tricky at all. Hopefully that helps everybody. I will be talking to you again in a week when we will start on the next chapters. And in the meantime, you take your exam. Hopefully not too difficult for you. Any questions, please do email. And I'll see you next week. If you do have any questions that I can answer in another video, by all means, send them to me and I'll create another video. Hopefully we all can benefit from the answers to those questions. All right. Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon.